Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, beautiful origami people. Well, I cover my bases. I greet people across the world because we have attendants from different places in the planet. So for some people, for different people are different hours in the day. So it's a greeting that covers through the day. So today we welcome Matthew Green to speak with us. Matthew is a New Englander transplanted to beautiful Monterrey, Mexico. He has been practicing origami. He has been a practicing origami folder and designer for 40 years, having designed more than 300 models, including real and mythological animals, masks, modular rings, and stars. Matthew's academic background in philosophy and theology and years of practical folding experience gives him a depth of creative insight to share with his origami students and with us. Lucky students and lucky us. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you.
So to
and
get
with all
us,
the people here.
yes, thank you. It's to get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your life, your background, and about life in Mexico, and what inspired you to make such move from New England.
Well, as you mentioned, I grew up in New England, mostly in Connecticut, and I started origami when I was very young because I liked arts and crafts and I liked Oriental things, and so I got into origami when I was probably like 6 or 7 years old. I don't remember exactly, but origami has always been a part of my life. You know, yeah, I just love origami. I got it in my blood. So after growing up, going to high school and everything in Connecticut, I went for a year. I went to college for a year in New Hampshire, so a little closer to your hometown, or not your hometown, but where you live now.
Yeah.
And after that, I entered a Catholic religious community, and so I was there for 1991 to 2013, more or less. And so during that time, I didn't do as much origami because it was a kind of a conservative community. We weren't allowed to have hobbies, but I still did origami because, half paper will fold, and so I would, I actually designed some pretty good models during that period. And since then, so in 2013, had already left that community, and I fell in love with a Mexican. And so I was kind of in transition at that point anyway, and I could move. I already spoke Spanish at that point. I'd studied and lived in Italy, in Spain, in Brazil, and a few different countries. So moving for me was not an issue. And so I came down to Mexico.
Yeah.
And since Monterrey is where he's from, this is where we live. So I've been here for 10 years now,
Wow.
and a little more than 10 years. And I love being here in Mexico. It's a great place. Of course, the people are wonderful. The food is good. Well, better than good. The food's wonderful too.
So I want to move on a little bit about what you have been doing lately. I'm going to share my screen again, which is modular, these beautiful rings that you have. So tell us a little bit about it. Tell us how you started the modular and what prompted you to begin.
So this was also thanks to that 1 year of challenge of folding a new model every day, which I should probably do again because it was a very fruitful year. What happened is that before that year, again, I think it was 2018, maybe in 2017, I forget. I had hardly ever folded modulars of this kind. I had folded maybe 4 or 5 modular models of this style, and rarely on my own initiative. It was more I'd go to a convention and someone would teach a class, and I'd either take the class, or I think even more often it was the kind of informal thing after in the conversations around a table, during the convention. Someone would say, "Hey, I took this class today, or I taught this earlier today, but some people didn't make the class. Who wants to learn? I'm like, oh, sure. It wasn't my thing really at that point, but I didn't hate it, and I would do it, just for fun, So I'd done very few modulars, but of this kind in particular, the radial, flat radial modulars. But that year, I was doing everything, all kinds of origami, and also thinking about doing origami that was like decorative origami of this that could be of this kind, So I went to a tour of a house. There's a university here, the Technological Institute of Monterey, which every year raffles off, I think, 2 houses. They hire these architects, famous architects, to build beautiful, expensive houses, and you buy tickets for the houses. It's a big thing here, the La Casa del Tec. And one of these Casas del Tec was not the prettiest house in my opinion, but the house was fully decorated and fully furnished. And there's this wooden decoration that was kind of like a starburst. And I looked at it and I thought, I could do something like that with origami, I'm sure. It has to be possible, And so I took a picture of it, and I went home and started fiddling about, and I hadn't done it. I had no experience designing modulars before. But I ended up coming up with this. So this is actually the first modular I designed, and this is not the first version of it. The original version was slightly different. It didn't have the color change, principally. And this does not look exactly like the thing that was in the house. I didn't intend it to either, because it had I think this is, an 8-fold symmetry. That had like 11 or something. I was like, no. Forget about, 11 or 13. It was some odd number. I was like, I'm not even going to try that. But the general idea, and the idea of having varying thicknesses, like here we have a thin point, and then it has a wide part, and it goes narrower again. Those are ideas that I got from that wooden ornament. And so I designed this, and I thought that I was, it's probably a one and done thing. Okay, I've done the modular origami thing. But then I thought, I'm not really satisfied the locking in this model. So I improved the lock a little bit on this model. And then I thought, well, there's got to be a way to make a base that locks better. I think I tried also another model from the bird base, which I have over here. I have a binder with some of the models I've diagrammed. I have the diagrams and the models. So I think this possibly the second one I did was this one, which is also using the bird base. But this is a kind of a complicated lock, and I just was not really satisfied. So I said, well, let me see if I can come up with another base. So I sat down and I did a sketch of kind of what idea I had for a base, and then I did some geometry and stuff to try to figure it out. It turned out to be much simpler than I thought it was going to be, because math is that way sometimes. Things just fall into place, and you realize this is super easy, and I thought it was going to be hard. And then I was addicted. And so since then, I have designed some other models, obviously that are not that are representational or other things, but I've kept coming back to the modular origami because there's something about it that is just really addictive. So that's how I got into it. Now, the picture you showed a moment ago was the large modular is one that uses the it's a water bomb base, actually. That's and I'd originally not done many water bomb based modulars. Actually, okay, so let me just move the little picture so I can see all the pictures better. Okay, right. So looking at those, we have the 2 columns, the top 2 on the left, and the bottom 2 on the right. So let's say the purple one on the top left, the rainbow one that's underneath it, the black and white one that's next to it, and the purple and red one below it. Those are all water bomb based modulars. Now, originally I didn't get into the water bomb base for modulars at all. I started off using the other base that I had designed, which is the top right there, that the top right one uses what I call the friendship base. But then I started working on my book, and so I've been working with Ilan Garibi to do a book of modular origami, and we can talk more about that later probably. But a lot of my modular designs ended up being more complicated than is normal for a modular design, you know. And so he said, you know, you need some simpler models for this book. And so I said, well, okay, the water bomb base is simple, you know. And the first one I designed, I don't remember which the first one was that I'd done with the water bomb base, but I said, let me go back and revisit that. And that prompted me to explore the water bomb base more. And initially, like I say, I thought that, like, what can you do with a water bomb base? You know, I just didn't, for a modular, this didn't seem to make sense to me. Okay, well, probably about 40 designs later with a water bomb base, I'm like, okay, yeah, you can do a lot with a water bomb base. And so yeah, and Elon gave me some really good tips for designing too. One of the tips that was almost, I'd say, revolutionary for me in a way was modular designs, since they're not representational, you have a huge amount of freedom. And I think that's one thing that I like about them. And he said, you know, look at the models you've done and look at techniques you've used, or you know, aspects of those models that could be reproduced in other models. They could apply in another way. So like the idea of doing a pleat. I'd done one pleated model. I think it was, I'd done it with what I call the friendship base. And then I said, well, why can't they do that with a water bomb base? And that's where you got that really colorful one that was on the left. That was my applying the same thing I'd done with the other base to this base, and boom, you get something different. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Right. Yes, I was going to ask you about the process of designing modulars, no, to give us some hints about how to go about it, because you know, how much math do you use, or do you just fill the paper and feel your way through? What are other hints that you give us that you could share about designing modulars?
So I have used some math for the modulars, but not a lot, honestly. What my process has been is, well, first of all, let me say that it is the process that I follow. But one thing I discovered at the recent, was it the last year, or no, early this year over in Bogota. You know, we went to the Convention of Creators. I spoke there a bit about my design process with modulars, and I realized that it's totally different from like Ilan Garibi's design process. He also does modulars. It's like totally different process. So I can only speak to my technique, which may not work for everybody, but you know, what I do, what my process has been after the first one. Okay, the first one I was looking for kind of the appearance that I wanted, because I was inspired by that particular wooden decoration I saw in the house, and the lock was kind of an afterthought. And I wasn't, as I say, I'm not super thrilled with. I mean, it works, it holds together. You know, it's no glue, and it's you know, it doesn't fall apart. But I think because of that, maybe because of the fact that it took me a while to get the lock right, my focus has shifted. So that my first idea is to come up with a base and have a lock. And so I think, how can I connect these things? The angle, because the angle determines how many units you need to complete a flat model like this one. So I've almost exclusively worked with 22.5 degrees. Actually, I have exclusively worked with with 45 degrees and 22.5 degrees. And so I think, how can I use a traditional base, for example, like the water bomb base? The water bomb base is, let me just fold two water bomb bases really quickly while we're talking here. So either I design a base, or I pick a base that exists and think, how can I connect these units? So what I did for the water bomb base I'm not the only one who's done it this way. But I'm surprised. I mean, I looked around when I did it and I said, there's got to be a gazillion modulars that do this. And nope, I mean, at least not that I found right off the bat. So let me just make two really quickly and I'll show you how that works. So the first thing I can say is I try to come up with a base and a lock, either a base that already exists or a new base. And I look for a way to connect them. Because if I can't connect them, I can make it look very pretty, but it's not going to be a modular because they don't go together, you know? So, okay. And this was, in the case of the bird base, I found a lock that I really liked. And then I found that, yes, in fact, someone else had already used that lock abundantly. And so I kind of, not wanting to go over the same ground that someone else had already gone over well, I figured I'd try somewhere else. So here I have two waterbound bases. And you say, okay, if I want to do a modular with a waterbound base, how do I connect them? Well, first of all, I want them to connect at a 45-degree angle, right, like this, because there's going to be an overlap. So we're not going to. I don't connect them like this because, first of all, they can't connect. There's no overlap in paper, and then also there'd only be 4. So if I want to do 8, I have to connect them like this. So then looking for a lock, what you need for a lock is you need to have. Well, there's several kinds of locks, but the easiest kind of lock is to have a tab that folds into a pocket. So, okay, here we've got a whole bunch of tabs up top, right? And what do you know? We also have pockets. Now, I don't need to fold all the tabs over because there's 4 of them. That's overkill. But what if I take just 2, these 2, and then I take 1 and I fold it over to the front, and I take the other and I fold it over to the back. Now, if I just fold them over, that actually does already work as a lock, but it's a little bit messy. But if I put them between the layers, just stick this in between the layers here, put this in between the layers behind. Now it looks, well, it can look nicer. I'll talk about that in a second. And it's just as strong. So I say, okay, now I have 2 units that stick together. And I also have these points that I'm not using in the lock. So I can do whatever I want with these 2 flat flaps. And so then, you start, squashing or inside reverse folding or pleating or, doing whatever. And sometimes I don't tuck both of these triangles in between the layers. Sometimes I leave it on top because there are other layers on top of it, and you have a color change because you have different colors of units on top of each other. So that adds to the colorfulness of the model. So that's my process. My process is find something that has paper I can use for decoration and that has a lock that sticks together. And then from there, I run with it and I see how many different things I can do with that. Most of the time. There are exceptions, and I'll just share one exception with you, which was this, which I just designed now, which is a Christmas wreath. So for this, I wanted to do a ring. So I had to have a hole in the middle because it's a wreath. And I needed to have paper that I could use to do, to give the impression of leaves or of fluffiness of some sort, like a wreath. Yeah. So, and then color changes would be good too. Like I have this kind of a bow thing at the bottom and the berries and things like that. So this is one that I did start from scratch thinking I want to do a wreath.
I'd like you to talk about what's coming in your life, your book. I took these screenshots of that you had shared in your social media of hints of how the book is coming along. It looks very exciting. So tell us about that book. How is it coming? When do you expect to be publishing it? And so that we can buy it.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I've wanted to do an origami book since I was like, 11, 12 years old. But I'd never imagined it would be modular. But at any rate, it's one of those things that, a book requires a lot of diagramming and it takes a lot of time. And you have to have a good number of models and you have to have a theme and all this other stuff. So I kept thinking I want to do it, but I don't see how I can do it yet, and I'd start diagramming. I started diagramming models, like say back in the 80s. And I just hadn't ever had enough material for a book. So after I hit this creative, well, and again, when I left the religious community, I started working on designs for a book of religious origami, but I kind of ran out of steam and my life got very busy because moving to Mexico and everything, and getting a new job as a translator. It was all, it was a lot. So then in, I think it was 2021, if I'm not mistaken, I had a lot more designs, especially after that year of that challenge year that got me going. And Ilan Garibi, I don't know if all of our listeners know who Ilan Garibi is. He's from Israel. He's a professional origami designer, and he's very methodical. And he's published books of his own on modular origami and on tessellations and on other puzzles and other things. And he said that year, he said, this is going to be the year of the origami book. So, his self-proclaimed year of the origami book, which is great. And he said, anyone who wants, I'm available as a coach. You can hire me and I'll coach you through your book. So at first I thought, gee, wouldn't that be nice? But it's just not going to happen for me. And then a friend here in Mexico finished his own origami book and asked me to be present. Well, at first I helped, proofread it, and then I also helped him present the book when it was published. And I said, why am I not doing my own book yet? So I talked to Ilan, and it's been 2 years of work. Initially, I thought of hiring someone else to do the diagrams because I thought it'll go faster. And then I realized, no, it's better if I do them myself. Well, Ilan convinced me of that. He said, your diagrams are good, you can do it. So I opted to do modular origami for a variety of reasons. In part because I think that there are not as many books of modular origami of this kind as there are of figurative origami, for example. I mean, of all these books on the shelf behind me, there are maybe 5 that are modular origami, and especially not kusudamas, but flat or rings and stars kind of modular origami. So I think the book will make a real contribution in that sense, that is something different. There's not as much of it out there. And so the book is now, all the diagrams are finished. The ones you showed on the screen are my diagrams as I finished them. There's a graphic designer who is making them look even prettier. She's working on the order and the presentation of the diagrams and so forth.
Well, thank you, Matthew. We are going to be then paying attention to your announcement of the book. We all appreciate you being here, your time with us. Always inspiring to hear your process, your history, how you became involved with origami. So big thank you for being here today. And Happy New Year to you and to everybody who attended today.